welcome and thank you for this opportunity to present this open scholarship presentation. So my name's Tracy White and I'm one of the Education Liaison Librarians, and I'm joined by my colleague Sam Helfridge, who's another Education Liaison Librarian. We're part of the Art Design, Arts and Education team for the benefit of our arts colleagues as well. And we're also joined by our colleague Susie Phillips, who's part of the Open Scholarship and Data Services team, and Susie will be back in a moment. So yes, thank you for this opportunity to present today. We've got a few slides to show you. Okay, and before we begin though, we'd just like to do an acknowledgement to country. So we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. And we would also like to acknowledge and pay respects to all First Nations people who may be joining us today. All right, so this is the session outline for this presentation today. Susie will begin by providing some background and context. And then as we're interested in your points of view, we know that you're engaging in this area, you have a lot of knowledge, so we're interested in your questions and feedback. And Sam's going to speak to a Padlet that she's created shortly, and then we'll discuss ways in which the library can support you, and we'll update you and promote library tools and resources that support open scholarship. We'll also provide opportunities for questions throughout the presentation, both in person and online. Are you ready?
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. That's right. So who's going to begin?
I know, understand.
Yeah, I'll try to get the clicker working.
Okay, I can do it with this. All right.
So which microphone were you using?
The stand here. Okay. Fine. All right. Thank you. All good? Okay. So apologies, everyone. A little bit of changes in what we're doing here. Okay, so open scholarship. So when we're talking about open scholarship, we're talking about a wide spectrum of open practices, not just publishing in open access journals. So it is including open access journals, but it also includes open data, open software, open peer review, and open educational resources, some of which we'll be talking about today. Open scholarship embraces the FAIR principles, which are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And if you think about it, these are all the things that you need to make sure that your research is being found by the people who need to use it. It is easy to use, and it can be used by a wide range of practitioners, researchers, and the public. The definition of open in this place is quite fluid, with quite varying degrees of openness. So open to access, all the way to the Creative Commons licenses, some of which allow your work to be reused and openly shared. And it can be quite difficult to navigate this space to work out what level of openness is appropriate for your research and the best way to make your research and your educational practice open. So today we're mostly talking about how to make your publishing, specifically journal articles and data, open, but it is important to think about other opportunities to make your research open, such as protocols for systematic reviews. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So why open scholarship? So I think most of you will be familiar with at least some of the benefits of open scholarship. In summary, open allows for access to your research, so faster, easier access, by policymakers, sorry, by the public, by other researchers. And when your research is hidden behind paywalls, it creates barriers to implementing evidence-based change. Open allows for greater transparency. So open grant proposals, open protocols, open data, these all enhance reproducibility and the credibility of your research. And open allows for greater collaboration. It provides opportunities for collaboration with the community, with other researchers, as well as opportunities for interdisciplinary research. So all of this ultimately makes your research more visible, and that in turn means it can be more impactful. So we're looking at social impact, such as influencing policy and being used by practitioners, and we're looking at citation impact. So there are a lot of different studies. I've popped one in the references at the end, but there are a lot of studies showing that publishing in open access journals increases your citation rates. Depending on which study you look at, the percentages are different, but there is solid evidence to show that there is an increase in citations. Citations are also higher for articles which have associated open data sets. So if you have a data set that you've made open and put the DOI for that data set in your publication, you're going to raise the metrics for that publication. And you're also going to have another research output, the data set itself, which will attract alternative metrics. And these all join together to create your research impact. So ultimately, open research is associated with an increase in citations, media attention, potential collaborations, job opportunities, and funding opportunities. And of course, more funders are making open part of their funding requirements. Right, so that's a lot there. We're not going to, as I said, cover all of that today, just a little bit of it, but we have a Padlet coming up soon, which Sam's going to talk about. If you have any questions about any of the areas of open, or if you're interested in us running sessions on specific areas of open, please pop a comment in the Padlet. We may not get to it today, but at least it lets us know other areas you're interested in learning about. And hand it over to Sam.
Thank you, Susie. So as you can see here, and you can actually click on this and it will allow you to access the Padlet. And we also have QR codes on the tables that you can scan to access it as well. And this is just to help us gauge your interest in current understanding of open scholarship and open access publishing. We've included a few topics that are going to be covered in this session up there already. You can vote them up and down depending on things that you'd like to know more about. You can add comments about things that we haven't included here that you have questions about. And at the end, we'll certainly go through any questions and we'll certainly compile a list with answers to send out to everyone after today's session. Feel free to access and add questions here at any time during the presentation today. And we'll take maybe about 5 minutes to everybody to spend with this and let us know what you're interested in, and then we'll move on with the presentation. We can have people able to access, they should be able to click, but if not, we can show it. Do you mind to do that change, Susie? Yeah.
The one in the chat section at the bottom.
Yep. I guess we could always unmute and ask the question as well if you wanted to. Very quiet. So it looks like we have a few people that are interested in My Research of Pure, which Tracy will go through, as well as the read and publish agreements and bridges. We have one vote for the OERs.
I'm always the least.
Absolutely, everybody is on board for open scholarship. Maybe give it another minute and then we'll move on. I think we've had quite a few people have upvoted on there when I was looking at the screen. So we might just move forward. So thank you everyone for adding for upvoting and adding any questions there. You can continue to do this through the session today if there's something that you think of while we're presenting that you'd like to know more about. So feel free to add those at any time. And now Tracy will be speaking to some of the library resources and tools that are there to support open access publishing here at Monash. So we, you want to come back or would you like? Sorry, that's right. So we just have a slide to show you, which we'll be discussing or demonstrating how to access this in a moment. So in keeping with Monash's narrative about open scholarship, the library encourages researchers to publish open access as well as to publish in the best source for their discipline and research impact. So as we said, the library provides a number of resources, and we've made a few updates to the library site. Just to demonstrate how to locate the publishing and metrics site. So from the live.monash portal, you can go to the library tile and the library homepage, which is the first link on the left-hand side. And then click on the link to more for researchers, and within that there should be a link for publishing and metrics. So click on the link to publishing and metrics, and so this is the site that was in the PowerPoint presentation, and you can see a number of resources and links that we'll be referring to in this presentation today. Thank you so much. Do you want to go back to the PowerPoint? All right, so just to give some further context, and we thought it would be useful to provide some definitions. So for this part of the presentation, we'll be talking about open access, and we can see that there's a definition of open access at the top of the screen. There's obviously a number of definitions available, but Open Access Australasia has this quite useful definition. So when we're talking about open access, we're talking about it as a set of principles and a range of practices through which outputs are distributed online free of cost or other access barriers, through licensing via an open license, usually a Creative Commons license. Freely available outputs can also be legally shared and reused. And we have some examples of different types of open access, so that we know that there's a number of types. Sometimes these have been color coded in the past, and there's some variation to these particular types. So if we use the kind of Monash acceptable language to talk about repository open access, which was formerly known as green open access, or journal open access, or publishing an open access journal, which was formerly gold open access. So we can see for repository open access,
researchers can submit their journal for publication and then deposit a version of their published work into a subject-based repository or an institution repository like My Research. And typically this version is a preprint or more likely, more commonly now, the author accepted manuscript. So the author accepted manuscript is the final version of the paper. And this is the preferred version because it's peer reviewed and also has the corrections without the publishing formatting. So preprints are no longer the preferred version because many of these don't fulfill grant application requirements. Repository open access can be embargoed, so there can be some limits for a couple of months or up to a couple of years. And at this time, the publication will not be accessible in the repository until the embargo time elapses. The publisher can also permit the accepted version to be loaded to a subject repository or even the author's website, depending on the publisher requirements, of course. For journal open access or publishing in an open access journal, the author submits their article for publication in an open access journal, and the publisher provides free open access to the full content in the journal, and then the author's article is immediately accessible upon publication. In some cases, the publisher may charge the author or author's institution or funding body an article processing charge. There's a comprehensive list of these journals, open access journals, available through the Directory of Open Access Journals. We just have some more information about open access. So on the right-hand side, you can see in the blue the two main ways to publish an open access article at Monash are to make a version of your research article available via My Research or Pure, or to publish an article in an open access journal using your existing publishing strategy. We can see that Monash encourages compliance with funding arrangements required by the ARC and MHMRC and other funding bodies, and linking a version to your to the university's repository will usually fulfil this obligation and enable open access. Regardless of the type of open access method, researchers may choose to retain a version of their publication and can submit a copy to My Research. And depending on the publisher requirements, as I said, you could upload it to a subject repository or even your own website. You can also make other research material open, including research data and presentations, and these can be published in Bridges, which is formerly known as Monash Figshare, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And the Research Outputs Collection Service, or ROC's team, collects research outputs and can assist researchers in making their outputs available via My Research. All right, so this is another screenshot. So this is, again, another website explaining how to actually make your research output open. So just do another quick demonstration of how to do this. So from the publishing and metrics site that we were on before, you can click on the link to open access at Monash. And the first link talks about, you can see I want to submit an open access publication to Pure. See the open access output submission internet page. So at the very top. Yep, just above expectations. Yep, so you can click on that and that should take us to the site that's on the PowerPoint slide. Yes, exactly. So you can see there's some information there. You can complete this form to attach your accepted version of the research outputs. There's some additional information from the ROC's team who can assist you, as I said, and also the different types of versions that you can submit. So that's a useful site to look at. We can go back to the PowerPoint and I'll just talk about some of the resources now. Thank you. So we've talked about the ways in which you can make articles open access and the resources that are available. So just to talk a little bit more about my research to start off with. So my research is the university's repository of academic and research outputs, and Monash academic publications are linked and displayed in this via profiles. So we're noticing an increased number of open access articles that are linked in my research, and we'll just display an example of that. So you can see this research output is a record in my research or Pure. On the right-hand side, we can see some links there, and the open access articles are easily identifiable with the Open Padlock open access link. So you can see the first link or the top link is the publisher version, and then underneath that there's also the final published version, which is the author accepted manuscript. So in some cases, there may just be the publisher version link, but we can see different examples of that in this particular record. And if we're discussing repositories, it's also useful to talk about Bridges, which is the university's open repository for data, Monash PhD theses and Masters by Research theses, as well as non-traditional research outputs. So you can publish and share your research via Bridges, and therefore increase discoverability and engagement with your research, make your research public with the allocation of a permanent ID or DOI, and comply with funding requirements. So we can see again some useful information on the right-hand side. So researchers can publish research data, promote their research activities, and control how others use this by applying an appropriate Creative Commons license. And Susie will talk about those in a few moments, as well as possibly limiting access with an embargo if necessary. Bridges allows researchers to create records and publish research with loads of different format types to display your non-traditional research outputs, data, and presentations. So you can also take advantage of that. Yes. So Monash should share. With Monash Bridges. Yes, you're in that too. Researchers can also collaborate with other researchers, both within and external to Monash, and you can create projects and within Bridges to facilitate this collaboration. And researchers can also create an online profile within Bridges. So this is important for graduate research students. We know that academics have profiles within my research, but graduate research students don't necessarily have those profiles. So if they want to create an online profile, they can do so. And just to reiterate, Monash users can log in with their Monash staff and email address to access Bridges and to create the records within Bridges. So there's more information about Bridges, and you can see the email on the bottom right-hand side there, which is researchdata@monash.edu. Just lastly, to show a couple of records in Bridges and my research. So this is an example of a record in Bridges, and you can see that it's some supplementary data. It's a table. The author has published this, so we can see that it's retrieving some metrics. Within the grey section at the bottom, we can see that it's linked to an article or a research output in Pure. So I'll show that now. And so this is the article in my research that the article in research output in Bridges was connecting to. And we can see that this is an open access research output with the open access links on the right hand side. All right, so I think we're going to hand over to Sam now, who's going to talk about some recent developments in open access. How are we going for questions?
Tracy, just so everybody sees me drop out of here. I'm just picking up the clicker. So I guess I have the joy of talking about some of the new developments with the read and publish agreements that the library and Monash are a part of. So for 2022, the Council of Australian University Librarians, or CAUL, has negotiated read and publish agreements with a number of academic and scholarly publishers. These are transformative agreements between libraries and publishers that takes the library's existing spend and repurposes it to include both the reading and the publishing and participating journals, which further supports open scholarly publishing. These agreements mostly cover hybrid journals. Hybrid open access refers to when an article processing charge is paid for an individual journal article to be made open access in an otherwise subscription fee-based journal. It is more in this more open publishing model, you will reach your research will be more visible and accessible globally to a wider audience, which can lead to higher citation rates and more engagement. You're also ensuring compliance with funder mandates that require research from these for grants and associated activities to be disseminated to the broadest possible audience to maximize the benefits of the research reach and impact. So you can see again that we are ensuring compliance. We're talking about increased visibility, and as part of these agreements, we're going to show some more ways that they can work for you in your research. So what we've put here is just to give you an idea of what this process looks like if you want to partake in these read and publish agreements. And this is just showing us the workflow for article publication and a journal that's covered as part of one of CAUL's R&P agreements. So you'll still need to submit your article following the usual format for author submission guidelines for the journal. So that has not changed. The article will then process through the usual publication process, including peer review. You will then be notified that your article has been accepted for publication, and it's at this point that you'll be asked and given the option to publish open access. As part of this, and as part of one of these agreements, then you will not have to pay transactional APCs. And your article will then be published directly to OA under a Creative Commons license, and they'll usually give you some options for that. And Susie will discuss what some of those licenses mean a bit later on in the presentation. So how to benefit from these agreements? So you're going to need to be the corresponding author to take advantage. Okay. Certain article types are going to be excluded. These can include things like editorials, news, and they even talk about obituaries not being included. So just FYI. You're going to use your Monash email address when you're submitting your work to the participating publishers. Make sure that you indicate Monash University as your primary institutional affiliation. If you're a co-author, so if you're not the corresponding author, you may want to ensure that the corresponding author works at an institution that also benefits from these read and publish agreements. And post peer review and on acceptance, the publisher is going to confirm this. At this point, Tracy, I'm going to get your help. So we thought at this point it would be good to kind of show you where you can go to see if the journal that you're interested in publishing in, where you can see if it's a part of one of these read and publish agreements. So the first thing we're going to do is we could actually probably go to the link here as part of this. You can also access it through that same page for researchers through the library homepage as well. So you can actually see here that this is a list of all the agreements that was updated in 2022. And you can also see where it lists on the left-hand side of the screen all the different publishers that we have that currently the CAUL has agreements with, And you can go specifically to those pages as well. So if we wanted to say, take a look at Springer Nature.
Okay, curriculum ones.
It's just taking a while, I think. It's just got it for a moment.
Asked, are the read and publish agreements only the journals or might look technical as well?
I think, at least for Springer Nature and Wiley, it's journal articles. I'm not sure. Do you know, Susie, for some of the other, like
No.
Oxford and stuff, it doesn't cover any
Not
of
at
those
this point,
topics?
No, it's James.
Just journal articles.
But they are broadening what these agreements are referring.
And look, they're changing every year. We're constantly getting emails from that there are new reading publish agreements being made, that there are titles coming on and off these lists each year. I think a lot of times when we're talking about some of these lists, it's a good thing to always go and double check. So just because 3 months ago you saw that it was there, and you're going to be submitting, I would definitely go back and check the list again, especially as we come towards the end of 2022, if you're looking to publish during that time. So these are all the ones that are listed here for the 2022 period. And each publisher has allotted a certain number of articles that can be published under each of these agreements. So for example, Wiley provided an allowance of 6,300 roughly articles. And to date, we just a little over 3,500 have been approved. So there's still some room left if you want to publish in one of the journal articles, the journals on the list for Wiley. There's still, we haven't yet met the cap for this year. Same thing for Springer Nature. There's a cap of roughly 3,300 articles. And for this year, I believe to date, we're looking at there's about 2,600 that have been approved. So again, we haven't met that cap yet. So there is still time and availability for you to submit for this year. So you can come to this, sorry, Tracy, you're there on the lovely showing us the page. This will go through the different aspects of these read and publish agreements. It will also tell you the member institutions. So if you're not sure that Monash is a member for that agreement, you can always look up at the top and it will detail who is a part of each agreement. You can see right there, Monash. You can see inclusions, they include some here, but we can actually go down and show the link to the list.
Oh, sorry, I think it's above this one.
Do you post it?
And you can see here, and it will tell you, you can search for the journal that you're interested in publishing in. It will tell you if it's included as part of the read and publish agreement. And that gives you a good indication for if that's something that you're interested in, and that there is still available to publish for the next time. And so we have those. Yes, we can go back to this. And so we've just listed here that a particular note for education that we have looked using the recommended list for education is included here, but certainly this is not an exhaustive list. We haven't included the title for arts. There are a number of them that are there as well. Again, if there's one that you're interested in publishing in, definitely it's worthwhile to go to those lists, take a look and see if there is other titles that are published. And we also have, as you might have noticed from the call website, we also have transformative agreements with Brill, Cambridge, Oxford, as well as a number of other publishers. So there are some allowances for Elsevier hybrid journal agreements as well. It's a bit different from the other publishers that are listed in that they are not offering a discount full APC for their the relevant hybrid journals. Instead, they offer a discount of 12.5%, which if anybody is familiar with Elsevier, that seems to be on point for them. But there is a discount that is available, and there are a number of journals that are on the recommended publishing list. So it is worth saving everybody you can from the APC charges if your journal is on that list for 2022. Again, always double check with these, and there will be new agreements and journals coming on off these lists for 2020 as well. I will turn over to Susie, who's going to be discussing Creative Commons licenses at this point. Very gingerly, if you want to move.
Very gingerly take that. And I've already pulled the back off it, so. I'm holding my computer's getting a little awkward. Okay, good. All right, hello again. I'm going to use the mouse. It's a lot easier. All right, so Creative Commons licenses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time and go into a lot of detail. They're not really exciting. They're just something that you should be aware of and know a little bit about. But it's always, you can always contact the library if you have any questions about which license is most appropriate for your work. So just to run over a few of the most common Creative Commons licenses. You've got the standard license, which is the CC BY 4. This is attribution only, which means as long as they give attribution for your work, they can do anything they like with it. So that is the most open license. And remember that for all of these licenses, they must give attribution. So no one can reuse your work without crediting you for that work. The CC BY SA is share alike. So if somebody uses your work, they must share it with the same license that you applied to it. So they can't, for example, use your work and then publish it under a more restrictive license. They have to use the same license that you have used. NC, so CC BY NC is non-commercial. So this is a very common one. Most people don't want someone taking their work and making money from it. There might be some times when you think actually that might mean that there is greater access to my work or greater publication of my work, depending on what it is. But for the most part, you're probably usually going to want to put an NC license on your work. And the no derivatives, the ND license, it means they can't change it. So depending on what license you put, you might allow someone to take that work, give attribution, but also add bits to it, edit it, change it, remix it, and then publish it as a new work, which we're going to talk a bit more about when we talk about the open education resources. So there are some reasons when you might want to put a no derivatives, and sometimes it would be better to allow derivatives to be made of your work. And then you have a combination of these things. So you might have NC, ND, so no commercial and no derivatives, which is probably the most restrictive license that you can add. So there are a lot of variations, and what you choose really depends on what the purpose is you publish in that piece of work and what you want that to achieve. So as I said, you can always talk to the Copyright Office in the library about what would best suit what your needs and what you want to do. All right. I'm just going to talk a little bit about open education resources now. So open education resources, there's a wide range of them. When we talk about OERs, it's going to use OERs from now on. It can mean open coursework, learning modules, digital learning objects, online tutorials. It can be a whole range of things. But increasingly, when we talk about OERs, a lot of the conversation is dominated by open books or open textbooks. And that is mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. OERs tend to be published on the more open side of the Creative Commons licenses. So usually, particularly with open textbooks, the idea is that you're going to allow other people to take your work and remix it and reuse it. And this is really advantageous in education because it means you might be able to take, for example, a textbook that has been published in America and adapt it to the Australian context, include Australian Indigenous knowledges without having to rewrite the whole book. Always, as I said, giving attribution to that work. So that person's work is still being reused. Citations will be driven up for that work. They might get more views for their work, but it means you can make it contextual for your students. So I've added the 5 R's in there because they really describe what the varying Creative Commons licenses allow, and depending on which license, what will be you'll allow to be done with your work. So you've got retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. I have popped a link to a good OER from USQ. If Sam, do you want to pop that in the chat so if anyone wants to have a bit of a look? A lot of OERs are very high quality. A lot of them are peer reviewed. Depending on the platform you're looking at, you can often search for OERs that have been peer reviewed and have a look at the Creative Commons license and work out how you might want to use that yourself. Okay, I'm just going to move on. So when we talk about OERs and impact, so there's educational impact and research impact. In terms of education, OERs have been around for some time, particularly in the US and Canada and a little bit in the UK. They're still fairly newish in Australia, so we're sort of catching up for a range of reasons. But there is a lot of evidence that shows that OERs are associated with better academic outcomes for your students. And this makes sense because OERs are generally freely available, meaning your students can actually access the work and not have to pay hundreds of dollars for a textbook, which quite often students just don't do. It means you can change it, as I said, for local context. You can add more representation in, so it's more relevant to your student body. They are generally more accessible, and they allow for opportunity for collaboration with students. You can have OERs where students that actually produce more content. They're generally more flexible and more interactive with more multimedia opportunities. So, for example, you can have H5P activities built into OERs. In terms of, actually, before I move on from the education aspect, so I am talking a lot about creating OERs here or adapting OERs. You can use OERs as they are. So if you are looking for an OER to use in your subject or maybe to use with a slight bit of editing and adjusting, you can contact the library and speak to your liaison librarian if you want some help finding OERs that might be relevant for your context. As I said, they're still relatively newish, so depending on the area, it might be hard to find one, particularly one written in an Australian context, but it's always worth having a look. Now, in terms of research impact, so I have had people ask if they can write an OER and have it be a research impact and a research output in and of itself. It's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. And it's not generally what OERs are about, but it's not completely impossible. But generally, when we're talking about the impact to your research, we're talking about when you have created an OER, or edited and remixed an OER and used a lot of your research in that. So many lecturers will use their own research when they're teaching, if you're using that. So this means that the research that you use in the OER is getting even more visible. So these are open, freely available globally, attracting attention to your work, driving citations, and driving out metrics. And a really good example of this, it's not a general example, but a really good example of this is an OER that was produced by a couple of academics in the BizEco faculty. This OER, what's it called, Forecasting Principles and Practice, has received more than 40 million page views, 5.5 million users from 209 countries. And the associated software package has been downloaded over 2 million times. So you can see how those kinds of stats, don't think that's what you're always going to get, but those kinds of stats can really help in a lot of different areas when it comes to promotion, when it comes to applying for grants, and when it comes to giving evidence of real world impact of your research. Okay. So the last slide to talk about OERs is talking about a project or a pilot project that Monash is participating in. So this is a pilot to really bump up the number of OERs that are written in an Australian and New Zealand context. So this pilot has 30 universities in Australia and New Zealand participating in a 2-year program. And the goal is that we're going to produce high quality, peer-reviewed OERs in a local context for academics and students and researchers to use. This program, it offers a lot of support for authors in creating OERs. It has community practice, it provides a publishing platform, Pressbooks, and it provides a lot of resources and information and support at every stage of the publishing process. And there are internal and external grants for people who are interested in potentially creating their own OER. So if you would like to find out more about that, you don't necessarily have to be wanting to do one now, but if you'd just like to find out a bit more about how that works, you can contact the email address down the bottom there, libopen-scholarship@Monash, or there's the webpage as well, which has a bit of information about it. Okay, that brings us to the end of our presentation today. So we have talked today about the benefits of open scholarship. We've talked about research outputs in Pure and Bridges. We've talked about the read and publish agreements, the core journal list, Creative Commons licenses, and open education resources. There is clearly a lot that we haven't covered in the world of open scholarship. So if there is something, as I said before, that you would like to learn more about, please let us know and we'll be happy to run a session for you.